You find yourself drawn to much more sleeker details, longer silhouettes, satin slips, and oceanic details. You may be drawn to the dark Siren Muse. This is part of a series talking about the 5 dark aesthetic muses: vampire, witch, siren, haunted or possessed doll, and dark fairy, doing a focus on siren in this video. I've already done a deep dive talking about vampire and witch, as well as an overarching video why I even narrowed it down to these 5 muses, but today we're going to be focusing on the many different ways to exude a dark siren look. If you're new here, hi, my name is Melissa. Quick recap if you are completely lost of what I'm even talking about or confused of why I even want to talk about specifically these 5 muses. Sometimes it feels a little limiting and frustrating to only get inspirations from celebrities, influencers, or even people in your life. And I find that getting inspiration from something that's a bit more ambiguous or abstract is a lot more creative, and you get a lot more ideas that way. Also, I have a background in fashion design, and when I majored in fashion design in college, a lot of our inspirations, we were much more encouraged to take inspiration from things that are a bit more abstract as opposed to real life people. Okay, so what does the siren aesthetic specifically look like on its own? The siren look, or even like a mermaid core look in a lighter sense, is going to be a little bit different than a dark siren look. A dark siren look is going to have this element of unsettlingness. There's definitely going to be a much more femme fatale look. I feel like the siren look in general is going to be naturally and effortlessly sensual with dark and muted colors. There is going to be some iridescence, maybe pearlescent textures, and definitely a lot of water-like textures, which you can see in satins or even high shine leathers, is actually quite minimal. Out of the 5 dark muses, it is effortlessly sensual, whereas vampire is also sensual but in a much more maximalist, very high texture way. The siren look, just like you would expect of a mermaid or siren or oceanic details, it's very sleek. It's also very long, like I picture long satin slips. But the siren look can also lean itself into other aesthetics. So there are certain styles that I feel like just naturally feel siren, but in their own way. And these are what I call dark siren subgenres. Of course, you have mermaid core. Mermaid core is going to be the lighter of any siren aesthetic. And sometimes it's not even inherently dark. It's going to have feminine details and of course pearlescent details. There's also night core. Night core, modern medieval, it's going by so many different style, but overall it is a version of modern revival styles, and in a way, if done very minimalistically, can actually have a siren look to it. It has armory, silver details. Again, if done minimally, it can give off a siren look. 90s runway styles like the long slips, very subtle but very high class designer details, is actually what I picture the most for siren on its own. In a more modern iteration, alternative min or minimal alternative style, it's sleek, it's subtle, it's abstract. Also, some cyberpunk iterations can give off a siren look as well due to the silver and chrome details, and sometimes there's this cold robotic look to it that leans itself into a siren aesthetic. So again, siren on its own actually is a really good base layer, but I don't want to deny that siren, like the dark siren look alone, is actually still a very beautiful look, and sometimes these quiet type of elegant look in a dark way is still very alluring. In short, that is what a siren is, and exuding a dark siren look is being this alluring, very elegant type of style, but in a dark and almost unsettling way. I feel like when you want a dark aesthetic, it's kind of embracing being unsettling in a good way. There's something very beautiful about it, and that's why so many of us are drawn to darker styles. There's this element that you can't really quite explain, and it's very mysterious, and it makes you want more. Just like a gothic novel or a murder mystery. You don't have to narrow down yourself to just one of the 5 dark aesthetic muses to give off a dark aesthetic. Sometimes you can combine it and it will be your own. It will make it your own style. So Siren on its own is, again, sleek silhouettes, subtle details, etc. But if you add a more saturated makeup look, or you add a bit more details and things that feel a bit more maximalist, you can end up giving off a Siren Vampire look. However, if you start to add a bit more layers, a bit more bulkiness in terms of the textures, maybe you play around with fabrics such as velvet or even natural fibers, or even go for a whimsigoth look, which actually looks really great with the Siren aesthetic, you may be giving off a Siren Witch look. However, if you start to add on lace, a bit more volume, poofy sleeves, doll-like details, and a much more modest silhouette, you may be giving off a Siren Haunted Doll look. And if you start adding more color, quirky and fun patterns and details, short layers, you may be giving off a Siren and Fairy or Fae look. Okay, so let's give more specific examples of what these different combinations can look like. So when it comes to just Siren on its own, again, it's very sleek, it's very modern, and there are many ways to go about it. My mutual Yelly Des, who I'm gonna put right here, she immediately looks like a Siren. Like, she has that dark Siren look. She has a very evident dark aesthetic, but overall, she just has an overarching Siren look to her. It doesn't matter how she does her hair or what garment she wears. There's something about her that has this oceanic look. It's very sleek, it's very modern, and it's very effortless in its own way. So she's kind of like an example of what Siren looks like on its own. An example of Siren and Vampire with like vampiric details. I think of my friend Angela Benedict. I am so honored to even have Angela Benedict as a mutual. Angela is a goth, and a lot of her YouTube videos and social media content revolves around what it was like being goth in the 90s. So she is like this wealth of information, of music, style, DIYs, and she just has amazing analysis videos. She plays around with different goth styles. Of the 5 muses, I definitely feel like she has Siren and vampiric qualities, and it's very interchangeable. But the reason why I think that she gives off a Siren look is because of the many long silhouettes that she wears. She does wear a lot of 90s and 90s inspired long slips that was very prevalent during the time, but she has these added luxurious details, whether it's the layered necklaces, the rosaries. When it comes to the Siren and Vampire look, it's when you add these maximalist details to the Siren base. There is a bit of corsetry, there's play with texture, there's a bit more structuredness to this. I feel like the Siren on its own is very sleek and very carefree, but when you add a bit of structure, whether it's in the lacing details or a bit more layers that have like boning in it, it will start to have a vampire style. As well as more saturated looks, I feel like Siren makeup on its own is glossy and sheer, but when you add like a very saturated red lip, that's when you have some vampiric details in it. Some crossover where Siren and Vampire have a lot of similarities is the long silhouettes, effortless sensuality, elegant details, and that supernatural element. Now when it comes to the Siren look with witch elements, I actually think of the style corporate goth. And the reason why that is corporate goth and office Siren actually really go hand in hand together. There is this level of functionality. There is a play with layers because when you work in an office, or you have to appear a bit more corporate, if you will, but still exude your dark aesthetic and still holding on to your self-expression in the office, you're playing with layers, which is a very big key element when it comes to having that witch look. It's very complex. There's a lot of different textures and layers, but in a carefree way, and it's not as structured as, let's say, the vampire look. Now, when you mix though Siren and witch, I think of my friend Aussie Dom, which I have her Instagram here. She plays around with voluminous textures like you see in some of the dresses, and she does a lot of corporate goth outfits. Like, she's a great inspiration. And there's this level of luxuriousness. There's also some earthy elements to her style. Like, there's something still very down to earth, even though she's doing these sleek and modern long silhouette corporate styles. There's still something that feels very down to earth. I also think of American Horror Story Coven, because there is a play of like the bishop sleeves, the fun hats that they have. And even though they have like details like the corset belt that we see in this middle image here, it's not done super maximally, and that's why I picture this more as a Siren Witch look. The crossover between Siren and Witch, where they already have a lot in common, is the effortless details, minimal details. I feel like when it comes to the Witch style, it's not super maximalist. What it is it's a play in texture, and it's very earthy. So there's that nature element. And they're both carefree, they're both effortless in their own way. You have the witch who takes inspiration from nature and gets their power from nature, but then you also have the siren who is empowered by the moon and the moonlight. When it came to vampire and witch, mixing it in with what it means to exude a dark siren look, there was actually already so much in common, and there was only slight differences. I feel like when it comes to adding siren into vampire or witch, it's just adding longer silhouettes, sleek details, and that effortless sensual element. But when it comes to mixing haunted doll or a dark fairy with the siren, there's going to be a slight more differences, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just creates a much more interesting juxtaposition because you have some of this contrast and pull and play when you add two different styles together, but still joined by a love for dark styles. The siren and haunted doll look reminds me of my friend Bara Hari, who is an artist, a singer and musician that I feel like you definitely need to check out, especially if you are a fan of Kate Bush. Kate Bush, I will go into much more detail in my haunted doll video coming later this month. Now, when it comes to adding the haunted doll element to a siren look, it's adding these intricate details, these intricate lacing, collars. There's also much more added volume, whereas the siren look on its own is long and sleek and modern. The haunted doll is going to have some added poof, some added ribbons, some added doll-like details, and again, it's playful. Where the crossover is the siren and the haunted doll naturally will have soft colors. Haunted doll aesthetic is kind of, I always thought of a Lolita style, so it's like soft pastels. And the siren I thought of like cool blues, dark purples, oceanic styles. So both of them together, they both have those soft colors in common, subtle elegance, and that unsettling element that is very alluring. I feel like the dark fairy is actually the furthest away from the siren. So when you mix a siren look that is very dark, alluring, sleek, but with the fun, punky, like, I don't know if that's the right word. Sorry, I think I'm getting a little tired. When I thought of like what it means to have a dark fairy look, I was thinking of like Nana Osaki. Like, it has this fun with play, textures, patterns that don't normally go well together, the more saturated look. Fairy is definitely for those who want a alternative dark look, but still don't want to let go of color and fun with patterns. So when you mix the siren and fairy or fae look, I think of actually Liv Tyler in the 90s. I think of Lord of the Rings. I think of Nightcore, modern medieval, because there is this mix of colorful aspects, but still it's not too colorful in your face like fairy would be on its own. It's still very sleek, it's still very minimal and subtle. When it comes to fairy, I also thought of like botanicals, but when you mix in the siren element, I think of water floral motifs such as papyrus, hyacinth, and water lilies. So you can get those details whether it's in the jewelry or maybe the prints and patterns. I also think of the fairy-like outfit from Ever After that Drew Barrymore wears to the ball. I feel like that movie in general, again, is like this fictional timepiece that actually feels very siren and fairy on its own. The crossover between the two, though, they both have that iridescent look in common, the play with shimmer. When it comes to fairy, I always thought of this play and fun with makeup, but Siren, even though it's a bit more subtle and a bit more monochromatic, there is still this iridescence that leans itself into a siren look. Okay, in the end, if you want to give off a dark siren aesthetic, it is all about the little details, especially since out of the 5 muses, Siren is going to be the much more minimal and the much more elegantly subtle of the 5, but in a dark way. So the details that really lean itself into a siren look, in addition to the long silhouettes, it's pearls, it's small trinkets. Like think of The Little Mermaid, how she collects all these different treasures that fall to the bottom of the ocean. It's chromes, it's silvers, it's cooler tones, it is sleek and modern textures, or it doesn't even have to be modern. I keep saying modern, but I'm just thinking of like sleek and smooth. And when it comes to perfumes, I think of saltwater scents like this one from For Strange Women. There's also this brand called Once Bitten that has these super minimal trinkets that I feel like you can collect and create a charm necklace of your own that's very personal. And she has this little oyster as well as this tin fish that actually really felt siren-like. Makeup is very important when it comes to the siren aesthetic as well. Even though I keep talking about how the dark siren look is the most minimal, does not always mean the natural or no makeup look. When it comes to a siren look, you can play around with glimmer and shimmer because you are mimicking the shine of the ocean, or you're playing with sheer black glosses that mimic thundery storms or the ocean at night. When it comes to the siren makeup, you can play around with the actual siren eyes that is often talked about. You can achieve that with dark, smoky eye looks or maybe an eyeliner. You can play around with high glosses along the cheek. You can play with purple glosses, black glosses, that bitten, cold lip look, maybe corpse bride colors, and sheer dark glosses. I definitely recommend the Rituel de Fille lip oils. They have one where it's like a very just pure black. They also have one where it's like almost black with a little bit of red, and you can play around with it, but their glosses and their lip oils are really great. And also Black Moon Cosmetics has a black opaque lip gloss in Mortician. Let's say you are a siren that lives in colder waters, aka most of the looks that I keep talking about when it comes to a dark siren look, whether it's on here or my other socials, I am guilty of mainly showing 90s slip dresses and different sheer elements and sheer robes that go along with it that makes it feel siren-like. However, realistically, you may live in a place that has multiple seasons, or you just have a colder climate. I don't want it to seem like the siren look is only limited to those who live in warmer places. So let's talk about how to achieve the siren look, but if you live in much colder places. So please bear in mind with me, I don't live in extreme cold climates. I do experience snow where I'm at, but again, please wear at your discretion and be practical and stay warm. So when it comes to the siren in colder waters, I think of fishermen cable knits. Like the history of cable knits really do go back to coastal fishermen towns, and the cable knit was a practical and even very beautiful way of keeping the fishermen warm. However, fisherman cables is a beautiful texture that could be layered on top of the siren-like smooth and long silhouettes that I keep referring to. Long layers are a great way to still exude that siren aesthetic. Sweaters over slips and fleece tights is also another way to go about that. And harnesses over very practical turtlenecks and sweaters is another way to still exude your dark siren aesthetic. And I also added a fun zoologist penguin perfume. I'm a huge fan of zoologist perfume, and I felt like this ties it in a cute little bow. If you liked all of the graphics that were featured in this video, I like to put all these graphics into a fun little PDF. I call them my after show notes, and they are available to my dollar Patreon members, which I'll link down below if you're interested. I hope you have a great week, and until next time, bye.